So, Jamie Bogle, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Mike.
Beautiful view behind you here at the Garda Riviera.
Best in the world.
Best in the world, indeed. What would you say is the main motivation what is it about this event that brings you over every year?
You mean apart from the good wine and the good food?
The good stuff, yeah.
Well, it's the Roman Forum was founded by Dietrich von Hildebrand, who was, of course, the great Catholic philosopher in the 1950s and earlier, escaped from Nazi Germany. And then in the 60s, 70s, after the Vatican Council realized that there were some serious problems going on in the church. And he, I think, was very quick to discern what was going wrong because he was such an astute mind. And he was now settled in America, but he thought it would be a good idea to start something back here in Europe. And so he started the Roman Forum, and John Rao has taken on the mantle, and each year we analyse some part of the state of the church in the modern world, which is, shall we say, somewhat mixed.
What do you think of the situation in the church right now?
Well, I think there's a crisis of leadership in the church because of a crisis of moral fibre, perhaps. The leaders in the church, both lay and clerical, the bishops included, are afraid to lead and afraid to be truly and openly and publicly Catholic. Partly because they're afraid of being criticised by the public media and by people generally, and partly because I think there's a certain crisis of their own faith. They don't believe so strongly as perhaps once they did. Maybe the two are interlinked. But the reality is that if you're a Catholic bishop, you have a lot more freedom than, say, for example, a public figure like a politician, to say what you know to be true. I appreciate there are restrictions on what a bishop can and cannot say, and indeed on what a leading Catholic layman can say. But there's a question of duty, and it's got to be said. If it's not said, who else is going to say it with the same sort of authority? I appreciate that those prelates who have tried to say something then get virulently attacked by the public media. I have in mind my friend George Pell, who's being very falsely accused and persecuted in what I can only describe as a kind of McCarthyite witch hunt against Catholic prelates and bishops. But having said that, that situation has been allowed to come about because if you don't say what you know to be true, then somebody else will say what they think is true, and that might be false. And that weakens the whole fabric of the church and of society and results in the kind of persecution we're seeing. Now, it worries me because in the already existing, and certainly in the short term and certainly in the long term, we're going to see incursions into religious liberty. The religious liberty of many has been and is challenged, but we're going to see not only in places where you might expect it, perhaps in the Muslim world, but in the West, we're going to see incursions into the religious liberty, particularly of Catholics, merely to state their beliefs, let alone to act on them. And that has come about because of this crisis of confidence, of moral fibre and willingness to speak and to say what you know to be the truth and what you believe to be the faith of which we are members. So the more you are unwilling to say this, the more likely it is that you will gradually see an erosion of religious liberty. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, in the United Kingdom, the rights of people to express themselves and their religious beliefs is gradually being eroded, despite the fact that there are laws like the European Convention on Human Rights which are meant to protect them. In reality, they're not being protected. It's rather like the Soviet Constitution. Well, that's overstating it, but in the Soviet Constitution there was a guarantee of religious liberty, but everybody knows it was more seen in the breach than the observance. Well, there is a danger that we're going to go that way. Now, the only people who can stem that particular breach and inroad into our religious liberty is Catholic spokesmen, not just lay spokesmen, but bishops. That is their duty. And at the moment, I fear they are simply not carrying out their duty as they ought.
Policy apparently of gender-neutral uniforms in a Catholic school. It seems like they're willingly going along with the whole politically correct program, even when they're not being forced to do it. They're going along with it. What accounts for that?
It's the same thing. It's the crisis of confidence in the faith and in moral fibre and simply belief in humanity. Once you start to abandon that, any of these things will happen. And frankly, so long as Catholic schools adopt the mores of the modern age and are unwilling to teach the Catholic faith, so much will they gradually decrease in importance. And eventually, and it's already beginning to happen, governments will simply say, well, why do we have Catholic schools? What's so unique and different about them? And we'll simply have them taken away from us. Now in Britain we have an incredibly generous system arising out of the 1944 Education Act of the Conservative government of those days, and the then Education Secretary R.A. Butler, who provided for state Anglican, not only Anglican schools, but state Catholic schools, state Jewish schools, and now there are even some state Muslim schools. Whereas in a lot of countries, Catholics have had to fight for justice in education. They haven't had to do so in England. Very complacently, we are frittering away that incredible inheritance. We could easily lose that. There are a lot of secularists, atheists, and anti-Catholics in England who want to get rid of faith schools. And since they're largely funded by government, it wouldn't be all that difficult. Now, if that happens, it'll be because of the crisis of faith and confidence of the Catholic leadership, both lay and clerical. So it's in our own interest to state our positions, state it openly, and state it with a certain degree of courage and confidence.
Along those lines, in talking about authority, would you say that the Francis pontificate, which is obviously known for mercy and less rigidity, quote unquote, is that going to make the situation more manageable or less manageable in the future?
I don't know whether that particular approach of his will make it easier or worse, but I do know this, that he is coming from a sort of Peronist background in Argentina. I think he tends to take a very dictatorial approach, which is belied by the words he speaks. I mean, it's all very well to talk about mercy and tolerance and so on, but if you're not practicing it yourself, then your words pretty soon sound hollow, and then people start to call you out. And I fear that is going to happen. He needs to be perhaps a little careful on that front. Also, I mean, there is clearly, it's important to emphasize mercy and to emphasize forgiveness and to emphasize the all-embracing, inclusive nature of the Catholic faith. I mean, we're the only faith in the planet, Buddhism included, that isn't racist, for example. Everybody is welcome to the Catholic faith, but every other religion, for cultural and historical reasons, tends to favor one particular race over another. We don't do that. So we've got we've got nothing to apologize for there. So stop apologizing. But what we do have that others don't have is the Catholic faith. And I think, as well as emphasizing things like mercy and tolerance and so on, which are, of course, Catholic virtues, we've got to emphasize all the other Catholic virtues, and we've got to emphasize the truths of the Catholic faith. Not only because there are people out there outside the Catholic Church who want to hear it, but also to strengthen the brethren. In other words, to give people within the Church the confidence to speak and to support and to state their beliefs freely, openly, confidently. If the man at the top doesn't do that, I'm not saying he doesn't, sometimes he does, if he doesn't do that, or if he tries to compromise that, or if he tries to de-emphasize it, then he's not doing any of the Catholic faithful in times when we're liable to suffer persecution any favours. And his job is to protect the faith, and in so doing he will protect ordinary Catholics. And I think we need more of that.
And that, along those lines then, as far as John Rao's symposium here, I think that's partly what brings so many people from so many different countries. And we're not talking about just folks listening to the lectures, but some top-notch academics, from all around the world. That's what's bringing them here, is the idea that there doesn't seem to be a clear message from the top, so the laity have to come together and form a consensus and work on strategy. Would you agree that that's one of the things that really is so appealing, the networking and the strategizing that goes on here at this forum?
Yes, I do think so. I think the Church is in a state of crisis to some extent, because a crisis of faith, of self-belief and of confidence. I'm not blaming the present Pope for that. It's a succession of events. But if you're in charge, if you're the top man, inevitably some responsibility sticks to you. And you know, there are the crisis of confidence is palpable, not just in the Roman Curia and in Rome, but all over the Catholic Church. There's a certain loss of confidence. If you want an organisation to grow, to develop, to attract others, and to provide to others what we have to give, which is not only the faith, but also all the other things, the good works that the Catholic Church does, then you have to have confidence in yourself. If you haven't got confidence in yourself, you can hardly expect others to have confidence in you. And I think that there is a crisis in the Catholic Church of confidence, exemplified by a lot of bishops, a lot of laymen, a lot of priests, a lot of religious orders, and we need to recapture that. Now, the evidence for that is what you just said, which is that more and more people from differing backgrounds, intellectuals and others, come here to this Roman Forum Conference. Sometimes some you wouldn't have originally expected to come, and they come because they've now experienced this crisis of confidence, and they want to find it. They will certainly find it here in the Roman Forum.
Say something again. I know you're a busy man, and it's almost time for one of the famous dinners here at the symposium. But say something about, you know, the camaraderie. And we talk a lot about the heavy issues. Of course, that's the main reason. And of course, central to all of this is the traditional Latin Mass. But you mentioned the wine earlier and some of the festivities and the fun that happens here, which is really also an important thing, because I think that sometimes traditionalists have this reputation for being dour and sour and everything else. But if you will, what do you think what John recreates here in terms of the culture, the good cultural background of Christendom? How important is that?
I think it's vital, absolutely vital. I mean, the whole attraction of the Catholic faith and of the Catholic religion is the culture that it produces. I mean, its attraction, of course, is fundamentally the faith and the belief, the truths of the faith itself. But what attracts many people outside the Catholic Church and inside the Catholic Church is the culture that our religion has produced. It has produced the culture of Europe. All these palaces and churches and convents and this civilization that you see behind me and throughout the whole of Europe is a product of the Catholic Church. What's not to like, as they say. Now, so it's not enough simply to talk about doctrine and faith. It's not even enough just to have the Mass, which is of course central. But we also have to remind ourselves of, cherish and restore Catholic culture. We're certainly doing that, or should I say John is, here in the Roman Forum. One of the great things about being here in Gardone, in Garda in northern Italy, is there is still a lot of that Catholic culture here, despite the fact that the faith is in some parts of the country and of Europe gradually fading away. The culture is still imbued with its Catholic origins. So, for example, we have authentic Catholic culture. The other night when we had the local folklore band, bagpipes and pipes of one sort and another, drums of this, that and the other, here we had a classic example of Catholic culture, completely inclusive, everybody there, all ages, several disabled people and their carers getting them up and dancing, youngsters, young children, babies, all races, all backgrounds, from all countries and none. That's Catholic culture. That is something a lot of people want and don't get, and are searching for, and often searching for in completely the wrong places. Because if you really want the real thing, you have to come to the Catholic Church and to Catholic culture. Then you will get it, and you will get it in the most enjoyable, most fulfilling, and most inclusive way you could possibly imagine. We're getting that here in the Roman Forum, not only that particular night, but also we have the Alpini come down and sing to us. We have, of course, all the art and architecture, also the villages here, which have been here for centuries, and all the people who live here are wonderful examples of Catholic life and Catholic culture, still preserved even in an age when the Catholic Church and the Catholic faith is ebbing away a bit. It's still here. We have to gather that together, rebuild it, bring it back together, bring it to people's attention, and that's what you're doing with Remnant TV. And that's what John is doing with the Roman Forum. And I think once people come, they're so attracted by it, they want to come back again. And all sorts of people, and it doesn't really matter even what their beliefs are necessarily, or even even if they have strange beliefs or even, strange lifestyles, they're still attracted by Catholic culture. That's why a lot of people come to Italy, to Spain, to Austria, to all those centres that were once centres of Catholic culture. That's what they're actually looking for. They say, oh, well, I've come to see this museum or this building or that palace or this convent or that lake or this city or this art. And they don't consciously say to themselves, oh yes, this is all Catholic, isn't it? But somewhere deep in their consciousness, they know that it is. And they're coming. That's what they want. That is our trump card. And we must play it. And unfortunately, whilst the secular world is beating a path to the scenes and places that were created by Catholic culture, the Catholic Church itself, in some parts, seems to be retreating from it, and instead wants to have hideous modernist boxes to worship in, and tedious hymns and songs and boring language and even modes of dress and speech, whilst the rest of the secular world is coming our way. We're missing a trick here, big time.
Yeah, and that's of course what John is trying to do, is encourage that rebirth that you're talking about, and getting the church to be proud of herself once again and begin to assert herself.
Yeah.
I think there are about...
And one of the great things about the Catholic faith is that it respected everybody's, it was so inclusive, it respected everybody's individual contribution to culture. That's why you don't get a monoculture in Europe like you get in the New World, in some parts of the New World. You know, you've only got to go 5 miles down that way or 5 miles that way. People are speaking slightly differently, they have slightly different customs, they have slightly different songs, they have slightly different ways of entertaining and amusing themselves, different cuisine, different food, different drink. You know, just 5 miles down the road, let alone crossing a boundary like the mountains here, or just going up into the mountains. You have half German, half Italian culture. And even within the boundaries there you have variations. You still have Ladine speaking people, a form of Latin, up there in the mountains with a different culture, but nonetheless still all part of Catholic culture. This is subsidiarity. This is the true multiculturalism, properly understood, not the bogus secular multiculturalism, which isn't multiculturalism at all. It's actually monoculturalism. We have the multiculturalism, polyglottism. We have it, different languages, different cultures, and it's all a creature and a product of Catholic civilization. That's what people want, actually. And even if they don't fully buy the Catholic faith, they want the culture. Let's give it to them.
That's right. That's right. Running out of time, Jamie, but I noticed that there are almost as many Brits here speaking as there are Americans. What can you say to encourage even more from your country?
Come on over. It's Catholic culture and it's good fun. We make the best wine, we make the best food. I mean, everybody knows food in Britain doesn't rate compared with the traditional Catholic culture of the continent. So, you know, it's a no-brainer. Come on over.
All right, Jamie Bogle, thank you very much for coming by, stopping by and talking to us tonight, and we'll see you later.
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much.